Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout-out to...
Something else.
Something else, Daddy.
This is Nickel Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to Something Else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 093 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at both Mid-South Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling from 41 years and 1 day ago, May 14th, 1983. My name is Aria, and welcome to the show. Normally at this point in the show, I would say, hey, let's talk about weird random things happening to me in real life. But there's nothing really to talk about. Really. And yeah, that's about it. I might have some big news coming up in the next few weeks, actually. In fact, I think next week I'm going to break the big news. In next week or in 2 weeks, I'm breaking big news. So stay tuned for big fucking news. Yeah. Thank you all for listening. Just a reminder, no matter where you're listening to us, you can listen to us on more places. Because you can listen to us on YouTube. You can listen to us on angrymarks.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Deezer. Basically, any place that you stream your favorite podcast, you can listen to this very program on. So listen, subscribe, do all that fun, happy shit, and just enjoy, because not only do you get these shows, you get when I, occasionally drop a bonus show. And, we'll see if I ever do another bonus show. I promise it'll happen again, but at least for right now, it's going to take a back burner because, I'm filling up on regular content. So we're discussing Mid-South Wrestling Road Class from May 14th, 1983. It is almost 3 years before my brother is born. So yes, for those who remember my brother Brian from early shows, actually today as I'm recording this, but 2 days ago as you're listening to this, it was his birthday. He's now fucking old, which considering I'm older than him makes me dirt. Oh well. Anywho, let's dive right in here, shall we? So it's Mid-South Wrestling, May 14th, 1983. We're going to kick things off at the Irish McNeil Boys Club in Shreveport, Louisiana. Let's go to the intro with Boyd Pierce and Bill Watts to discuss what we're going to see on this week's program.
This week's edition of Mid-South Wrestling Television Network. I'm your host, Boyd Pierce, and this week is no different from others on Mid-South Wrestling, as matchmaker Grizzly Smith always signs main event matches for you. This week, it'll be headlined by a lumberjack-style match. That means wrestling lumberjacks will be on the outside of the ring to make sure the two contestants remain on the inside. If they come out for any reason, they'll be thrown back in. And inside that ring will be Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus the Black Ninja. A lot of great action coming up. The man to tell you about things that have happened in the past and look forward to in the future. And the commentary for this week, Cowboy Bill Watts. Bill?
Well, thanks, Boyd. Lots of things happening in that Ninja match. It seems like it's been a catalyst with Akbar there and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. But first, for a moment, the Helen Cox Middle School in Harvey, Louisiana, May the 20th, the date of their 8th annual Awards Day program. Students are presented scholastic, athletic, and special Cougar Spirit Awards. And all those kids wanted the Junkyard Dog to be there. Unfortunately, his schedule was so busy, he could not attend, but he wanted to pass on his regards and thanking them for inviting him. Now, of course, 2 weeks ago, DiBiase got back on the scene, said, I'm the boss of the Rat Pack. Duggan overstepped himself in firing Matt Bourne. Duggan said that he was through with any association with Akbar, and he asked DiBiase point blank, was Akbar going to be involved with him, and DiBiase had told him no, and it turned out that Akbar and DiBiase and Mr. Olympia had a plot to gain the Mid-South tag titles. It all came to a head, and let's watch as Duggan undressed, Skandar Akbar 2 weeks ago here on Mid-South.
So the big news just continues to be the big news from the last few weeks, that being the Jim Duggan face turn, the split from Ted DiBiase, and Ted DiBiase officially, proving what a scumbag he is, what a liar he is, telling Duggan, hey, I'm on your side, or not so much on your side, but as long as you don't fuck with me, I won't fuck with you. We'll go our separate ways and move on with our lives. That lasted for a week. And then, we saw what happened, you know, last week when Jim Duggan was wrestling Kendo Nagasaki, and Duggan was kicking his ass, and then DiBiase ran in and knocked Duggan the fuck out with a loaded glove. Now they spend the first 9 minutes of the show recapping all of that, which, it's a 43, 44-minute show, and you're spending a good chunk of it just recapping it, which, sounds like, oh man, they're really eating up some time with, recaps. But also it shows you, like, how important it is, because, not just for the people who may have missed last week's show, but also, VCRs were so rare at the time. So it's like people did not have the ability to just tape these shows and watch them back repeatedly. So if you saw an angle that you loved, it was one and done. All that's left was your memory. And hoping that, in 30 years, some weird ass billionaire, buys up all the tape libraries and sticks them up on this thing called the internet, which will make you sound even crazier if you talk about it in 1983. But, still. Yes, this is well before Al Gore invented the internet, folks. But, it does show how important it is by recapping it, by reminding you, hey, this happened, get it in your head, this is important. Yeah, we air a lot of stuff on this show, but we're not fucking, recapping the expiration of time match from last week. We're recapping this shit, because this is our main event angle. This is our chief storyline moving forward. Even though Dog is the one with the North American title, it's become obvious lately Dog has been taking a little bit of a back seat here. And to be honest, I don't think a lot of people are noticing. So, other to note, and I wouldn't even bother, but next week this comes up again, there was a school that wanted Junkyard Dog to appear at their awards day on May 20th. And Bill Watts made a point to announce that that's not going to happen. Junkyard Dog is not coming to your school on May 20th. We're sorry, but too bad. Why did they even bother acknowledging this? Like, that's where it was funny to me. It's like, you could have just never mentioned, especially never mentioned it on TV, and you would have been fine. But, something tells me that there must have been some sort of, public rigmarole here. Otherwise, why the hell would you go out of your way to say that Junkyard Dog, the top babyface, is too busy and cannot attend your function here that you invited him to? Because unlike with Tim Horner on Smoky Mountain, this is not self-sabotage. I promise. They're not trying to bury Junkyard Dog yet. That comes in about a year and a half, when he bolts with no notice to Vince. But we still have a year until that happens. So from here, we get more recapping. Now, you remember last week, they vaguely mentioned an incident that happened in Houston between Ted DiBiase and Chavo Guerrero. And it was incredibly vague. They didn't go into detail. But, basically Chavo got his ass kicked by Ted DiBiase. So the follow-up to that is Bill Watts is going to tell us what the fuck happened to Chavo Guerrero.
Hacksaw Jim Duggan has to remember, as being a member of the Rat Pack, they weren't beyond planning some pretty devious schemes. In Houston recently, when DiBiase was still partners and buddies with Hacksaw Duggan, he was considered a member of the Rat Pack. Duggan had been embarrassed by Chavo Guerrero, probably the toughest, roughest guy from south of the border I've ever seen. And they set Chavo up. They flat set him up. They claimed somebody had a person speaking Spanish call and say it was El Gran Marquez, who was an internationally known Mexican superstar, and that he challenged Chavo. Paul Bosch booked it in Houston, and then El Gran Marquez did not show up because he never was booked there. But DiBiase and them, let's watch as Chavo Guerrero was set up, and he's badly injured at this point with some problems with his neck. The voice was Paul Bosch, and Boyd, you were there.
Right. Up
Up in the ring is Boyd Pierce.
This event, one fall with a 45-minute time limit. Ladies and gentlemen, on my left, the high-flying popular star, Chavo Guerrero. And on the right, you see three outstanding grapplers. El Gran Marcus is not here. You, the fan, will decide who will wrestle Chavo Guerrero.
Wait a minute, Boyd Pierce. The fans don't have to decide anything. I challenge you, Chavo Guerrero. You embarrassed my good friend and partner, Hacksaw Duggan. But let me tell you something. Hacksaw Duggan is not the leader of the Rat Pack. I'm the leader of the Rat Pack. I'm the big cheese, and I'm back. And if you got any guts at all, you just tell these two guys to get out of here, and I'll beat you right here in Houston.
All right, fans. Let's see who you want him to wrestle. King Kong Bundy. Mr. Olympia. Ted DiBiase. There's his opponent, Chavo Guerrero versus Ted DiBiase.
So there we have it now, the selection of an opponent, and Mr. Olympia is up there. Well, we've got a double going on here, and hot-headed Chavo Guerrero hits first one and then the other. And
All right. So let it go a little bit longer than I was planning, but, we don't have too much audio on this show here today, believe it or not, even though I just aired a bunch of it just now. So it's kind of a weird way to go about doing this angle. So they advertised Chavo Guerrero versus El Gran Marcus. And I'm imagining that didn't mean much to the market, so it didn't, kill the crowd to have Marcus, quote unquote, no show, even though that was he was never booked. He was never planned to actually be in the match. This was all just a big angle. And so the story that they told us was that somebody, we don't know who, but somebody who spoke Spanish called saying they were El Gran Marcus and getting themselves booked on this show. Kind of like, whatever. Okay, it is what it is. And so when Gran Marcus didn't show up, this was a ploy by the Rat Pack, which is Ted DiBiase in charge. And, they got Olympia, and, they got an associate in King Kong Bundy. And, eventually we had Taboo Tuesday, because even though DiBiase demanded the match and said it was going to be him, they still did the poll. DiBiase won. It's like choosing a street fight over a verbal debate. It was one of those things. It was kind of obvious what the winner was going to be here. And then we didn't even really get a match. It's supposed to be Chavo Guerrero versus Ted DiBiase. Olympia and DiBiase just laid out Chavo 2-on-1. Bundy, 440 some odd pounds, large, shaved man, head to toe, sticks out like there's no tomorrow. He disappeared. King Kong Bundy disappeared here. And this was, like I said, a 2-on-1 angle here. This was when Boyd was yelling at the fans to not throw things inside the arena, which, is why Boyd was ranting and raving last week about how you shouldn't throw things in a wrestling arena. See, I told you that would come back. Anyway, Olympia and DiBiase laid out Chavo with a spike pile driver, and the people in Houston did not get their match. They didn't get the match they paid for. They didn't even get the match they thought they were going to get. So back in Shreveport, we go to the ring for our first actual match. It is tag team champions Ted DiBiase and Mr. Olympia with General Skandor Akbar versus, as Reeser introduced them, the popular duo of Art Cruz and Jerry Caldwell. A very popular duo, even though they've never teamed on Mid-South TV before. Watts talked about Olympia's recent addition of a foreign object to his boot, mentioning last week when he interfered and cost two a match against Bundy. This was an enhancement match against two mostly competent jobbers. And, of course, as I wrote that, Olympia drop kicks Caldwell, who immediately gets back on his feet and tags out. Legitimately, he did not even sell it for a single second. And Watts announces the random appearance for the first time this week of Butcher Vachon, who is suddenly going to be all over this show for the next few weeks for reasons. All the people on the show, and Butcher Vachon is a strange one. Anyway, DiBiase pins Caldwell with a power slam. Hacksaw Duggan versus the Black Ninja Kendo Nagasaki with General Skandor Akbar in a lumberjack match. So Duggan runs to the ring during introductions, and the fight was on. I'm going to be perfectly honest, this match was not as good as the match between them last week, as it wasn't just Nagasaki getting his ass kicked for 30 seconds. That was great. This, not so much. Of course, Kendo randomly does the Watusi, which was cue for Duggan to kick his ass. They did just enough to establish the rules and the stipulations of the match, where both men get thrown out just to get thrown right back in. And keep in mind, again, this is 1983, so we haven't seen the same matches and same angles on every single show now for, 30 years. It's still relatively new to have a match like this on television. So suddenly Duggan locks on a face lock, and Akbar whispers something to Butcher Vachon before leaving the ringside area. We saw what was whispered as Butcher then awkwardly tripped Duggan and dragged him outside, but the other lumberjacks ran over, and we had a brief battle royal. The babyface lumberjacks took it upon themselves to run around the ring and throw Duggan back in a few seconds later when Kendo threw Duggan to the side of the Butcher. Anywho, Duggan wins with a spear. This match was pretty good for a Kendo Nagasaki match since they had all this extra stuff to distract you. So, we go to commercial, we come back. Bill Watts has temporarily left, and tagging in his place is Mr. Wrestling 2, the man who does not need an introduction. So here's the introduction.
We have with us here at the Mid-South Wrestling table a man who needs no introduction to wrestling fans all over the world, Mr. Wrestling 2, and he has a message for us.
Well, thank you very much. I've always felt that I was always man enough to accept defeat from a man that defeated me as a man. But we have a lot of men around here that choose not to accept or look for defeats as a man. Instead of that, they have to have people coming out from left field, people not just as a man coming out, but people with things tied to their hands, tied to their feet, boards flying in the air, chairs flying in the air. It's always got to be something besides what God has given them, the two hands, the feet, the body. Well, let me tell you something. Anytime a man defeats me as a man, I'll be the first to stand and congratulate him. But defeat me as a man. And what I'm really backing down to is Mr. Bundy and Olympia. Those two men are on my list, and I intend to straighten things out one way or the other. Matter of fact, I think you got some film here. Let's have a look at it.
All right, let's watch it right now.
That was nice of Olympia, or not Olympia, but 2 to pitch it to our video highlights of last week's match. Anyway, well, that's, being aired here. Let's talk about the promo. So the man who doesn't need an introduction, so we're going to give him one anyway. 2 said that, he's a babyface. So, when he gets defeated, he's a man. He will stand up. He'll congratulate you on beating him as long as, you beat him like a man. You use what God gave you, your hands, your feet, whatever. Fight like a man, win like a man. And, if you're the better man, he'll be happy to congratulate you. And, Bundy, that wasn't what Bundy did. And technically, if you want to say, Bundy, but Bundy really had nothing to do with it. It's not his fault. Olympia ran in and knocked 2 the fuck out. And, Bundy got the win, but, that's what it is. So they show the highlights of last week's match with Olympia. I keep saying Olympia. There's too many Mr. Masked people on this show. Go to the highlights with Mr. Wrestling 2 and King Kong Bundy, and come back to where Boyd is now going to ask Mr. Wrestling 2 about that and the future plans.
We viewed what happened last week between Mr. Wrestling 2 and King Kong Bundy.
Well, Boyd, you just saw it. That's exactly what I was talking about, what I was referring to. And I personally would like to make a challenge to Bundy and to Olympia. Bundy, first of all, You, sir, will never see the day that you will count me down for a 5 count. I'm telling you point blank. If you feel that you're man enough that you can do that, be my guest and give it a try. I'm telling you, you can't. And as far as Olympias is concerned, I want to challenge to this man, point blank also, at any place. It doesn't make any difference where it is. Anywhere in this United States, USA, I don't care where it may be. Olympia, you've done enough to me, and you're not going to do any more. I've had it with you up to here. Bundy, both of you, get yourselves together, because I'm personally issuing a challenge to both of you, and I hope that you're man enough to sign the little contract, and let's see what you're really made out of.
There's a challenge of Mr. Wrestling 2 to Mr. Olympian King Kong Bundy. We'll be back with more action after this important word.
Now, did you catch the mistake he made there in his commentary? Because he says, Bundy will not pin him for a 5 count. Just, ignore the fact that he did, in fact, pin him for the 5 count. That's something that actually happened. But, anywho, so he wants a match with Mr. Olympia anywhere in the United States. So me being a smartass that I am, I'd be like, hey, what if he wanted it in Canada? I mean, 2 won't cross the border and wrestle him in Canada? It's not, you could say anywhere in the United States. And it's 1983, so we do have all 50 states. What if he wants to wrestle in Puerto Rico? Not the United States, but it is a territory. What other territories do we have? I think we have American Samoa. If he wants to wrestle down in American Samoa, are you going to tell me that 2 won't get on a plane and follow him to America Samoa? Or does that not count as America? What counts as America, Mr. Wrestling 2? And why won't you, accept Olympia's challenge in Canada or in Mexico or, in Ohio? Places that aren't America. All right. So then we get Super Destroyer versus Ron Ellis, who's wearing a mesh shirt for some reason. Super Destroyer was last seen helping Jim Duggan beat up Matt Bourne like 6 weeks ago. That will never be talked about again. Watts was so excited about this match, he talked about his true passion, amateur wrestling. Maybe he needs to talk to matchmaker Grizzly Smith about putting on more exciting matches. Watts said he was, for whatever reason this got brought up, Watts said he was born 2 years after Lou Thesz won the NWA title, which sounded like complete bullshit. So I looked it up. Watts was born in 1939, and Thesz did not win the NWA title as we know it until 1949. Hell, the damn National Wrestling Alliance doesn't even start until 48. However, technically, Thesz did win a championship called the NWA World Title, which was the National Wrestling Association World Title, which is the title that, when people talk about Gotch and Hack and Schmidt and, all them, Stanislaus Zabisco, that's the NWA title that they're talking about. The NWA title currently held by EC3 has nothing to do with that NWA. It's, the NWA that, let's be honest, the ones that people remember, Lou Thesz and Ric Flair and, Harley Race and, Dory Funk Jr., etc., as being the NWA champion. So, going back to the original point, Watts was born the same year, not 2 years later, so it's not quite the load of bullshit it sounded like on the service, but still, decent load of bullshit. So anyway, Super Destroyer won with the Superplex in a match that will also never be talked about again, and in fact is so forgotten that Super Destroyer wrestled on next week's show, and I forgot that he wrestled on this week's show until I'm reading my notes right now. Butcher Vachon versus Tony Torres. They announced that next week, Junkyard Dog and Butch Reed will be a team for the first time ever. And we're going to have David and Kevin Von Erich versus Terry Gordy and Buddy Roberts. Yes, I'm talking about, Mid-South, not World Class. That'll be in about 5 minutes. Plus, it's not even Kevin Von Erich, it's David and Kerry, actually, but, they'll look alike, whatever. Plus, in 2 weeks, we hope to have Mil Mascaras the real El Gran Marcus, not that Tom Jones, and Tito Santana in 2 weeks. Hopefully. We'll see. And speaking of a match, Vachon won with a hangman submission in a match that definitely happened. Time for the expiration of time match. Tony Zane and Rip Rogers versus Johnny Rich and Tim Horner. Rich would, of course, be part of the Party Patrol with his brother Davey one day, and is the cousin of Wildfire Tommy Rich. Hey guys, can I get a mention on your podcast? Sure, Tommy Rich, I don't mind. So, I didn't really notice this in Smoky Mountain, plus it was, 8, 9, 10 years later. Johnny Rich looks a lot like Johnny Cash here, which I imagine was probably not the biggest coincidence as to why he went by the name Johnny Rich. Rip Rogers kind of looks like Lanny Poffo, and Tim Horner looks like the type of guy who will cut a promo one day on Mr. Wonderful. Anyway, they also announced that next week it is Jim Duggan versus Butcher Vachon. This match went to the expiration of time, but like the match last month, they continue to a finish for the live audience, but also like the match last month, we will never hear about this match ever again. And I don't think anybody's crying. So, as a show, there's not a whole lot to mention about this show. I mean, we got the Ted DiBiase Chavo Guerrero angle from Houston, which got some heat on DiBiase and Olympia. We continue the Mr. Wrestling 2, Mr. Olympia feud along with Bundy. And this is what I've been saying for a while. This is what I've always said. Mid-South and World Class 2, we'll talk about this in World Class later, they do a fantastic job of getting all the stories with the top guys meshed in together. So, yeah, Ted DiBiase and Mr. Olympia. DiBiase's feuding with Duggan. Olympia's feuding with 2. But then you also have Olympia with a side thing on Bundy. You have Junkyard Dog here as the North American champion, so he's involved in the mix. Duggan's got a thing against all of Akbar's guys. They do a great job of intermingling everything. So you can do a random match like Mr. Wrestling 2 versus King Kong Bundy, and it doesn't sound like a throwaway. You're just waiting for the run-in disqualification. It sounds like an actual continuation of a feud that has been going on that we've been watching. But again, this show is not the most exciting thing ever. Let's be honest. This week's show, we could call it skippable if you like, but, it's continuing to set the table. And we're going to see how things go in the next few weeks. The next Superdome card's in July, so at some point we got to start teasing things for that show. Although I think you pretty much know what the top of the card's going to be, just, hearing this right now. I mean, I'm not spoiling anything by telling you, that, for instance, Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase might be wrestling on that show, as are Mr. Wrestling 2 and Mr. Olympia. I wouldn't want to spoil anything for you by telling you that or anything. But from there, we're going to move one state over. We're going to go to the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, World Class Championship Wrestling, May 14th, 1983. Let's go to the intro with Bill Mercer, who's going to tell us about this week's show.
Welcome to World Class Championship Wrestling from the Sportatorium in downtown Dallas, Texas. International stars of wrestling. And one of those great stars is the gentleman Chris Adams, a young man from England. We have a feature on that. And a double main event on World Class Championship Wrestling. The young man from south of the border, Jose Lothario, meets the Ugandan giant Kamala. And then the second half of the double main event is that exciting young man, Iceman King Parsons, and his unorthodox style of professional wrestling. The Iceman, who battles one of the Freebirds, Buddy Roberts. Buddy Roberts, a charter member of the Freebirds. The double main event on World Class Championship Wrestling. We'll have all that excitement and more, and we'll start with gorgeous Jim Garvin and Mike Bond on World Class Championship Wrestling next.
Okay. So this was the show that I threatened to forget to watch this week, or, just, pretend like I recorded it and then technical error issues precluded it from ever, being broadcast. It's not that bad. But yeah, it's not they build it up by saying it's a double main event, but to be honest, is a single person out there super excited for Jose Lothario versus Kamala. And of course, we also have Iceman Parsons versus Buddy Roberts, and a feature on Chris Adams, which is the second time we're going to hear him speak. And the first time wasn't exactly, the greatest thing you've ever heard in your life. So we go to our first match, Jim Garvin with Sunshine versus Mike Bond. Mark Lawrence, being Mark Lawrence, introduces Jim Garvin as Gentleman Jim Garvin. So he's mixing up the nicknames of, his lighter weight talent here. And Mercer, of course, corrects him immediately by saying he's gorgeous Jim Garvin. Sunshine cleaned and disinfected the ring before Garvin dared to enter it. And then Garvin takes the mic from Mark Lawrence for a pre-match promo.
Welcome to World. Whoa, just a minute. All right, I want to do one thing, and I want to make this quick. I want to make a public challenge to one David Von Erich. Anywhere, anytime, any place, man. Any kind of match, I don't care. Gorgeous Jimmy really don't mind, all right? Because I know I'm better. A public challenge to you, David Von Erich. Wherever you're hiding, obviously you're hiding now because you're not out here.
Okay, so he's challenging David Von Erich, which is a feud that's been going on since literally when we started recording these shows with World Class. Literally, I think the first episode was when Garvin challenged David Von Erich, because he said he was never going to wrestle on TV, but he would wrestle David Von Erich for the Texas title. That was the first show we talked about on World Class. And so it's just continuing on 2 months later, still going. And he says anytime, anywhere, any place, any type of match, because he knows he's better. So Bond's got his black control top briefs here, which were pulled a lot higher than Garvin's. I guess you don't have to worry about showing ass crack with tights that go up so high, huh? So this is Bronco Lubitsch's first match since he got bumped in the Ric Flair-Kevin Von Erich match from a few weeks ago, which leads to a plug for the greatest international Star Wars soon, which, will now have Giant Baba from Japan. So last week they announced that the greatest international Star Wars was in about 60 days. So I'm assuming we're now about 53 days away from the greatest international Star Wars. So a little less than 8 weeks. Lubitsch, of course, is famous for not going down to count on a 3 and instead just dropping to one knee. Can you imagine if a referee did that these days? It's like, I know the people involved in my local promotion. If one of the referees dropped to one knee to count, you would be able to hear them screaming from the back, So in case you're one of those referees listening to this right now, drop to one knee, the next show on Friday, and let's see if Ely, screams from the back. Anyway, Garvin did the gimmick we've seen on every week on one of these shows, where he beats his opponent and keeps pulling him up at the 2 count so he can do more moves. And finally, Garvin won with a body block. All right. So, a few weeks ago, we heard from Chris Adams for the first time. And it sucked. I mean, it was a live promo as much as a live promo could be. Because, he's there with Mercer. And he's talking about, wrestling, in every country, including Texas. So now we're going pre-taped. We're going out of the Sportatorium. We're going to have some tea. It is tea time with Chris Adams sitting down with Bill Mercer. And let's go to that right now.
Time with Chris Adams. And Chris, once again, welcome to World Class Championship Wrestling.
Thank you, Bill.
The tea, I hope, is to your satisfaction.
It is. It's perfect.
Tell us about your background in England, where you're from there.
Well, I'm from a place called Stratford-on-Avon, which is 80 miles north of London, and that's where Shakespeare was born, so it's a pretty famous place.
Oh, yes, it is. And you youngsters there don't have the aspiration to be actors, all of them, then?
No, not all of them. No.
Tell us about your athletic background, particularly wrestling. When did you start?
Well, I started 5 years ago, and I started in England, and I got good enough to where I won the British Empire Championship.
Great, yes.
And I held that for 3 years. Then, after then, I had the chance to travel And since then, I've been all over the world, to Japan and Mexico and Africa. And
here
of
in the
course,
United States.
here in the United States, right.
Or what about wrestling here compared to the other places?
I find the wrestling here is a lot rougher, you know, kicking, punching, a lot more physical, I guess you call it dirtiness, you know. But
maybe sometimes brutal.
Really.
What about then? You're brought up on more Greco-Roman wrestling, more techniques?
Yeah, more techniques. But I feel with what I've learned in the States, and especially with my background, that I can handle most situations, you know, now in the States.
You mentioned the British Empire Championship. You also have had another championship worldwide.
That's right. When I went to Mexico, I won the light heavyweight championship of the world from Perro Aguayo, which many people will have heard of here. So I did pretty good down in Mexico as well.
And you met Chavo Guerrero there?
Yeah, Chavo is an old friend of mine. I know all the Guerreros, you know, the three brothers. So I spent some time with them in Mexico. They're really good wrestlers and really good friends of mine.
Coming into this area, do you know the Von Erichs well?
No, everyone's heard of the Von Erichs, but you know, they're world famous. But I never met them. And this is the first chance I've had of meeting them, and I'm really impressed. So, you know, I know that there's a lot of good people in this territory, especially the Von Erichs, especially the Freebirds, and one person, actually, that I must tell you about, and that's the Mongol.
Oh, yes, you mentioned him last time.
I met him in Germany, and he was, to say the least, he was bad. You know, he really is an evil person. You wouldn't know. I wouldn't like to explain what he did to me in Germany, but all I can say to you is that he's a vicious man, and I'm going to get even with this guy. So I want everybody to look out for that one, because I really do have something against this guy, and I aim to get him back.
Chris, thank you very much. Chris Adams for visiting with us over tea today. It's been a pleasure to have you around with us now, and we look forward to future combats with you.
Okay, Bill, thanks.
And World Class Championship Wrestling will continue right after.
Okay. All right. So, all things considered, you know, with, you know, that one very obvious, you know, exception, I thought this one went a lot better than the last one. I thought, you know, the last one, he was very awkward, very new. You know, I don't know if he's really new to cutting promos, but at least new to cutting promos in the area. And it just was very awkward, very stiff. And I thought this one was a big improvement. Now, he's going to get better, but, you know, I wasn't left wanting to lose the tape on this week's episode, so to speak. So, I mean, again, it's just another introduction piece. And first of all, Mercer apparently made him tea, which was perfect. So, hey, good for Bill Mercer being able to make teas, all right? So let's give him some applause here. He talks about being born and growing up in Stratford-upon-Avon, where Shakespeare was born. Talks about traveling and wrestling all over the world, including being the British Commonwealth champion, I believe he said. You know, he mentions, and this is a little clip that gets brought up a lot when they do world-class clips, Adams saying that, you know, the wrestling in America, it is a lot rougher, a lot more kicking, a lot more punching, as opposed to the Greco-Roman technique wrestling. You know, he notes that he beat Perro Aguayo for the World Light Heavyweight Championship and mentions being friends with all the Guerreros. I was hoping he was going to name them all, but he didn't. In fact, he doesn't actually mention any of them. And then, you know, I got to give people points for honesty, because, you know, it'd be so easy when, you know, he asked about the Von Erichs for Adams to just be completely full of shit and be like, oh, yeah, I'm huge fans of them. I've seen them wrestle all over the world, and they're great. No, he tells the truth. It's like, of course I've heard of them because, you know, they're, you know, stars, you know, all over the world, but I've never had a chance to see them wrestle before. He's never got a chance to meet them before now, and now he's impressed, now that he's met them. He's impressed by the Von Erichs. He's impressed by the Freebirds. And then he talks about the one guy that he's mentioned before, and, you know, we have to have a feud, I guess, the Mongol. So apparently they have wrestled in Germany, and the Mongol did something that you cannot repeat here, apparently on American television, which it's Germany, so that could, you know, cover a lot of stuff. stuff you're allowed to do in Germany that you can't air on TV in America. I don't know why my head has gone this point, but I'll just say it. I thought about that episode of South Park where, Cartman's mom was on German fetish porn and Cartman asked about it. That's where my head went. Yeah, I'm the innocent one here. Anyway, as you heard, there's a plane flying overhead, which would have been really handy in that promo from like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Let's be honest here. But all right. So we couldn't just tape it, and I guess, hey, this might have been the best we got out of Chris Adams. It really wasn't that bad, even with the plane. So he takes off the suit, he puts on the tights, and he steps into the sportatorium and the ring. You go one-on-one with Butcher fucking Vachon. I'm fucking serious here. Butcher Vachon, who has been, I can't say he's been nowhere, but he hasn't been on our radar at any point over the past year or 2 years we've been doing this show, is suddenly on both shows the same week, right? They announced that next week is going to be Kevin versus Terry Gordy for the American Championship. And honestly, I thought Vachon's career was over at this point. But not only does he have a few more weeks in Mid-South before going to the WWF. I screwed that one up. He's going to be here on World Class again at least next week. And he's going to be in Mid-South for a few more weeks. And then he's going to the WWF for almost 2 years, which somehow I had no idea about, even though, I know far more about WWF history than I do other wrestling. Of course, I know everything, so anytime I don't know anything, that's a shock. So Adams got Irish whipped into the corner, but stumbled over his own 2 feet before a super kick party broke out, and Adams won with an enziguri. Not the most exciting match in the world, but the crowd seems to like this Chris Adams fellow. All right, so first half of the double main event, it is Kamala with Friday and General Skandor Akbar versus Jose Lothario. Of course, every time I see Jose, I keep waiting for the random appearance of jobber Shawn Michaels. But it turns out that's not even a thing until January of 1985. So we get a lot more Jose and a lot less Shawn Michaels. Kamala is so upset that Jose won't just stand there to get his ass kicked that he jumped up in the air. Jose, by the way, is 48 years old in this match, following in the footsteps of 45-year-old Butcher Vachon. Mike Bond is only around, I guess, to bring down the average age of the jobbers on this show, but I can't find his age. But he has to be younger than them, right? He has to. Kamala finally punches Jose and then begins biting Jose for the disqualification. Yes, the entire match, bell to bell, was a couple punches and a bite. And that's it. David Manning began screaming at Akbar on Friday to stop Kamala because, goddammit, that Jose Lothario has a family and he's got to train Shawn Michaels, and Akbar and Friday are, not stopping him. They just stood at a distance. And finally, Chris Adams runs back in to drag Jose out of the ring as Akbar and Friday finally take control of their man. So Chris Adams all over this show, right? So then we go to the second half of the double main event. In fact, if they only had announced this match as the main event, most of y'all would have been like, okay, that's the main event. But it's Iceman King Parsons versus Buddy Roberts. And, we mentioned this just a few minutes ago at the Mid-South report, and we'll kind of recap it here. This is an example of why the Freebirds Von Erichs feud was able to go on forever and stay hot for as long as it did. We didn't just have Freebirds versus Von Erichs every week. What they did was establish the Friends of the Von Erichs, so you can do things like the 6-man tag last week with Iceman, Chavo, and Kerry, and now split that off into a singles match with Iceman and Buddy, and say with all sincerity that this is a continuation of the overarching feud. And, that is the one thing that we're missing in current wrestling. And as great as current wrestling is these days, I'd like to see a return of this, where you have your top 5 or 6 faces, you have your top 5 or 6 heels, and even though they're all paired off with individual feuds, they're all woven together. So you can do random matches like this and have it make perfect sense. Fucking Chris Adams is feuding with, David Von Erich. Kevin Von Erich's feuding with Flair. Kerry's been in Japan, but I'm going to bet he'll have somebody to pair off with too. And they're all still feuding with the Freebirds. And then you have Iceman on that side. You have Chris Adams coming up. You have Chavo Guerrero. They're all mixed in together, and it's all fucking great. And this is, part of what people loved about it. Nowadays, it's like, and, I'm not just going to sit here and blame Vince Russo, but it was a late 90s thing where everyone stopped being friends. Faces stopped being friends with each other. The heels stopped being friends with each other. Unless you were deliberately in the same group, no one liked each other. And it's like, whatever, right? So this match was the definition of all right. It was the best match on the show. Not that that's saying much. Roberts went up top and Parsons flipped him off to begin the comeback when Michael Hayes runs in for the disqualification. So yes, the double main event, we got 2 disqualifications. Now Hayes has a pair of scissors and is threatening to cut the Iceman's hair, but Iceman stops him and briefly gets the advantage. Gordy runs in, and now it's 3-on-1 as Gordy drops him with a pile driver. Hayes and Gordy then hold Parsons, and Roberts cuts off one of Parsons' braids. Chris Adams, who's going to be in every segment of this show apparently, runs in for the save. Mercer at one point screamed that this looks like a terrorist attack, and he said that bringing scissors to the ring makes this a predetermined situation. Why else would he have brought scissors to the ring, right? That's what Mercer's saying. It kind of makes sense in case you're ever, it's telling you as a fan, like, hey, this is not normal, and, you can't claim innocence that it just happened when you're carrying a fucking pair of scissors with you. By the way, Hayes ran in with that pair of scissors, and, don't run with scissors, folks. Please don't run with scissors. All right, so we had 5 minutes left on the show, and normally at this point, Mercer will do a quick recap, and that will lead to, an interview with one of the participants in the main event. May have been the Freebirds. In this case, could have been Parsons, could have been Chris Adams. Hell, they could have brought out one of the Von Erichs here, because did we even have a single Von Erich on this show today? We did not have a single Von Erich on this show today. So you literally could have brought out one of them. Could have brought David to talk about Jimmy Garvin. Could have brought Jimmy Garvin to talk about David. You have 5 minutes left. So, okay. Deep Seat. Okay, let's see here. So I watched it. Mercer's recapping the show, telling us what's happening in each match. That's great. And I'm just waiting for the interview with one of the proponents in the main event. And I'm waiting. And I'm waiting. And it's been 31 years. I'm still waiting. Because, yeah, the last 5 minutes of this show were just Bill Mercer recapping the last 40 minutes of this show. I don't know why. It's possible that, the show ran short and they didn't realize until it was too late. So they just taped something with Mercer, to fill in the time there. It's possible. But, it made for a bit of an awkward ending here. And, I'm sure, that, sometimes shit happens, I guess. So we'll just, hopefully next week is a little bit better. But, next week, I'll warn you, Bill Mercer's on vacation next week. And oh boy, if you ever, disparaged Bill Mercer, and Lord knows I have, next week is the week where I'm begging for Mercer to come back. So that does it for World Class, and that does it for this week's show. I want to thank everybody for listening. Again, there's going to be a big announcement either next week or the following week. I'm thinking it's going to be next week, because that'll give me enough time to properly build it up and yada, 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 yada. But for now, and also, in addition to that, I got to figure other shit out too. But, so for now, that's going to do it for this week's show. I hope you all enjoyed it. It's May, whatever fucking day it is, May 15th, 2024, as you're listening to this. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Hope you all enjoyed it. And we'll talk to you again in 7 days.